Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. Chief Damian Okoro sat alone in his private study, the only room in the house that truly felt like his. Outside, the sprawling mansion buzzed with artificial laughter, music, and distant voices. But inside this room, it was quiet, solemn, and dimly lit by a single lamp beside his grandfather's desk. The scent of aged wood and old books lingered in the air like stubborn memories. In his hand was a medical report, its contents a cruel echo of everything he feared. Stage for cardiomyopathy. He read it for the third time, hoping the words would shift, morph, maybe change into something hopeful, but they remained the same. His heart, the very organ that had carried him from the dusty streets of ABA to the summit of Nigeria's billionaire class, was betraying him. The doctors gave him a year, maybe less. But death wasn't what scared him. It was what he would leave behind. His company, his name, his legacy, and worse, his sons. He had built everything from nothing. As a boy, he used to hawk sachet water under the scorching sun. His rise had not been easy, filled with betrayal, loneliness, hunger, and rejection. And yet, through it all, he built Okoro Group, a conglomerate of shipping, real estate, and agro-industries. But now, as he stood on the cliff of death, what haunted him more than the grave was the state of his children. Derek and Desmond, his twin sons, the living proof that wealth without discipline becomes destruction. Since the death of their mother 10 years ago, things had only grown worse. He had tried to instill values in them, but their hearts leaned more toward parties, pleasure, and power than responsibility. Every time he closed his eyes, he didn't see his empire. He saw them squandering it. They hadn't earned any of it. They hadn't suffered. They hadn't even respected him. There were board meetings where they arrived late, still smelling of club smoke. There were land deals where they refused to show up, trusting aides to finalize multi-billion naira transactions. Damian had kept quiet. He had let it slide. But now time was no longer a luxury. He needed to find a successor, not by blood, but by merit, someone who would not just inherit his wealth, but carry his name with honor. His hands trembled as he folded the medical report and tucked it into a drawer. Somewhere deep in his heart, an idea had begun to form, a cruel, yet necessary test. One that would shake the family to its foundation. He rose slowly, gripping the edge of the table. "If they must bury me to wake up, then so be it," he whispered to himself. The clock ticked on. So did his plan. The Okoro twins lived like monarchs. The night after their father's third hospital visit, Derek had rented out an entire rooftop bar in Lekki, complete with fireworks, girls in sequin dresses, and a DJ flown in from South Africa. Desmond, on the other hand, had just flown back from Dubai, where he had reportedly spent over 35 million naira on watches alone. They laughed like children, spraying champagne on strangers, toasting to a future they didn't earn. Their father's declining health was just a topic of mild irritation. Papa's always exaggerating. Rich people just fear death too much, Desmond had told his friend while sipping cognac. Even if he dies, we already know the lawyer. He said we'd inherit it all, Derek replied, slapping his twin on the back. They were proud, entitled, and entirely unaware that the very walls they danced in were shaking beneath them. What they didn't see was their father sitting in the corner of a family gathering days later, watching them from behind dark glasses, heart heavier than ever. He had tried to groom them into men, sent them abroad for school, enrolled them in business leadership programs, even made them assistant directors at Okoro Group. But they treated it all like decoration. Derek once skipped a crucial investor meeting because he had a spa appointment in Ghana. Desmond, during a product launch, was seen outside the event flirting with actresses. It was no longer just youthful misbehavior, it was rot. Damian sat quietly, listening to them laugh about a Lamborghini they crashed and abandoned like it was a toy. He tightened his fists onto the table, his soul screaming, "These boys will bury me twice." But in all this chaos, the world still revered them as heirs. Newspapers called them the young kings of the Okoro Empire. Influencers adored their luxury, and they walked with swagger through the company like they owned it. because technically they soon would. Damian could no longer delay. The doctor's words rang like a siren in his head. "Prepare your affairs, Chief. You don't have long." And so, in the secrecy of the night, he summoned his most trusted lawyer, Mr. Martins. "I want to know who truly deserves what I built," Damian said quietly, his voice almost breaking. Mr. Martins frowned. "Sir, are you suggesting—" "Yes," Damian interrupted. "We fake my death. Let them believe I'm gone. Let them show their hearts. And may the crown fall only where it is truly earned." The plan had begun. The test had started. The inheritance of pain had just opened its gates. The sun burned fiercely that afternoon when the battered Peugeot 504 rolled into the compound of the Okoro mansion. Dust trailed behind it like a signal of poverty. From the back seat stepped out a slim, ebony-skinned young man carrying a worn Ganamusco bag and a nervous smile. His name was Ikenna, nephew to Chief Damian Okoro. His late father, Damian's younger cousin, had died years ago after a failed farm investment. Since then, Ikenna's mother had raised him in the village, hawking vegetables and working as a cleaner to keep him in school. Now at 23, he had been sent to the city to learn work, under the famous Chief Okoro. He had been told there was a training program, that he would learn business, see the world. But from the very first moment he stepped foot into the mansion, he knew something was wrong. Derek and Desmond spotted him at the gate. "Who's that?" Desmond asked, pulling down his sunglasses. "Looks like a new gateman," Derek smirked. When the driver explained he was their cousin from the village, Derek scoffed. "Cousin? This one? He looks like someone who still bathes in the stream." Within an hour, Ikenna was handed a mop, directed to the servant quarters, and told that business training would begin by washing the compound. He slept on a thin mattress beside the cook's assistant. His only clothes were the 2 shirts and 1 trouser he came with. Still, Ikenna said nothing. Each time he was mocked or insulted, he bowed his head and responded with, "Yes, sir." But his eyes, they never lost their light. There was something in his gaze, a quiet fire, a determination that no insult could kill. And yet, every day brought a new humiliation. The twins made him wash their cars with toothbrushes. They sent him to buy condoms, cigarettes, even underclothes, mocking him for being village blood. They laughed at his accent, his shoes, even his Bible. But in all this, Ikenna watched, listened, and endured. What they didn't know was that Ikenna was not just a cousin. He was a mirror. He remembered stories his mother told him about Uncle Damian. How he once sold firewood. How he failed 3 times before succeeding. Ikenna believed that suffering was part of the path. So, each night, while the mansion slept, Ikenna tiptoed into the library. He dusted the shelves, found old ledgers, and read with a hunger that no food could satisfy. In those pages, he wasn't a servant. He was a student. And slowly, silently, the boy they mocked was becoming the man they would fear. Every morning, long before the cockerels crowed in the village, Ikenna would already be awake in the mansion's servant quarters, not out of duty, but because the mattress he was given made sleep impossible. Thin and torn at the edges, it barely shielded his back from the cement floor. His slippers had holes, and his only belt was a frayed rope. While other staff muttered complaints or traded gossip in the kitchen, Ikenna remained silent. He would kneel to scrub the mansion floors, often ignored, sometimes stepped on by the very twins who shared his blood. Derek once dropped a glass of juice on the floor and called him to clean it, only to intentionally step into the mess again. "You missed a spot, rat," he said with a laugh. Still, Ikenna wiped it with trembling hands. His dignity bruised, but not broken. Inside him, a promise whispered, "This will not be the end of my story." The most painful part wasn't the work, it was the invisibility. To them, Ikenna wasn't a human being. He was a background fixture, someone to send on errands, to insult in front of friends, to assign impossible tasks. Once, he was asked to clean the chandeliers despite having no ladder. Another time, Derek locked him outside for forgetting to iron a designer shirt on time. No one cared that he hadn't eaten that day. When Ikenna sat alone during meal breaks, the cooks often gave him leftovers, cold beans, dry EBA, or watery rice. But Ikenna never complained. At night, he'd sneak into the library with a cloth to clean dust, but also to learn. The bookshelf, to him, was not furniture, it was a portal. Financial records, contracts, shareholder agreements. He read them with a hunger the twins never knew. And the more he read, the more he understood how much was at stake, and how unworthy the supposed heirs were. Chief Damian had noticed. From his study window, he once watched Ikenna struggle to carry heavy cartons of office files for the twins. Instead of mocking, he observed how Ikenna sorted the files after hours, read through them before returning them to the shelf. One night he summoned Ikenna, expecting nervous obedience. But what he saw surprised him, a calm, thoughtful boy with clarity in his eyes. "Why do you read my business books?" the chief asked. Ikenna knelt. "Because I want to learn, even if I was brought here to serve." That night, Chief Damian saw what he hadn't seen in years, a younger version of himself. Not in his sons, but in this quiet boy from the village with nothing but a brain, bruised hands, and burning purpose. And so, an invisible door opened between them, one that would soon lead to everything. One humid evening, as the mansion slowly settled into silence, Ikenna was in the library again, his eyes tracing every line of a worn-out book titled Foundations of Nigerian Business Law. The others were asleep or on their phones. Ikenna was seated cross-legged on the tiled floor, a flashlight beside him, flipping pages and taking mental notes. He didn't hear the door creak open. He didn't notice the soft footsteps. But what he did feel, what made his heart almost stop, was the sudden warmth of a hand resting gently on his shoulder. He turned sharply and froze. It was Chief Damian. No words, no security. Just him. Alone. Watching. Ikenna immediately rose to his knees, stuttering apologies. I didn't mean to intrude, sir. I just wanted to return the books." But Chief Damian simply smiled and pulled out a chair. "Sit." That night became the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Chief Damian didn't ask him about the books. He asked him what he thought about them. To his astonishment, Ikenna had opinions, interpretations, even business ideas. He explained how the company could restructure its agro sector to save money. Damian didn't interrupt once. When Ikenna spoke, his voice trembled, but his words were sharp, calculated, precise. For over 2 hours they spoke, not as master and servant, but as mentor and student. When the clock struck midnight, Chief rose from his chair and looked at Ikenna with eyes filled with something rare. "Hope. Come here every night," he said. "Don't tell anyone. Not even the staff. You want to learn work? I'll teach you what real work is." That night, for the first time since coming to the mansion, Ikenna didn't cry before sleeping. Days turned into weeks. Their secret meetings became frequent. While the twins snored or partied, Ikenna learned budgeting, operations, crisis management, and leadership strategy. Chief Damian began to share not just knowledge, but also his regrets. How he had loved their late mother too much, and in her death, had spoiled the boys out of guilt. "I raised them with comfort, but not character," he once said, his voice laced with shame. Through Ikenna, he began to dream again, dream of a legacy that wouldn't rot. He still hadn't told Ikenna about his sickness or the idea of faking his death, but deep inside, the plan was already crystallizing. He was testing waters. And every night, Ikenna passed the test. Silently, humbly, unaware that the crown was already shifting, slowly, surely, from bloodline to merit. The twins remained oblivious to the quiet shifts happening in their father's heart. Derek continued throwing weekend parties in Banana Island, inviting celebrities to his father's house without permission. Desmond bought 2 sport bikes on impulse, crashing one within a week. When the company's quarterly meeting was announced, both skipped it, citing mental stress. Chief Damian didn't even flinch. He had stopped trying to force responsibility. Instead, he watched. He documented. He collected every action, every failure like a prosecutor preparing evidence. The board had also begun to whisper. Investors were growing nervous. The once stable Okoro Group was showing signs of fatigue, not because the company was failing, but because the heirs were incapable of steering it. Behind the scenes, Ikenna began to stand in. Quietly, discreetly, When a supplier raised concerns about delayed payments, Ikenna drafted the apology letter himself and ensured payments were made. When staff complained of salary cuts imposed by Desmond, it was Ikenna who mediated with HR and reversed it through internal recommendations. At the warehouse, employees began to recognize him. "That's the village boy," someone whispered. "But he knows more than the directors." His efforts didn't go unnoticed. The chief's personal assistant, a sharp woman named Clara, began to slip him confidential documents, saying, "Olga trusts you. Don't disappoint him." Yet, despite all this, Ikenna never moved from the servant quarters. He still washed cars, still scrubbed floors, and yet he was the invisible spine holding the company together. One afternoon, the twins arrived at the office and found their father's portrait removed from the executive boardroom wall. Furious, they demanded to know who gave the order. "It was me," Ikenna said from the corner, respectfully. "Sir said it needed restoration for preservation." They sneered. "Know your place, boy." But Ikenna didn't flinch. He had learned the art of silence, the kind of silence that holds power, the kind that listens more than it speaks. And as they stormed out, one thing became clear. Derek and Desmond had the title of heirs, but not the weight, not the skill, not the legacy. And Chief Damian, watching everything from a hidden room through a security feed, leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. "It's almost time," he murmured. "Let's see what they do when they believe I'm gone." The test was coming. The death, the crown, the truth. It was a Tuesday morning when Ikenna first met Amarachi, not in the halls of the mansion, but in the garden, where she came to deliver vegetables with her mother. Her radiant skin glowed beneath the sun. Her soft voice murmured apologies when she nearly spilled the basket beside him. She was simple, respectful, and kind. Nothing like the other women the twins chased. Ikenna noticed how she didn't flinch at his servant clothes. She greeted him with her full chest, even thanked him when he helped carry his sack. From that first interaction, something bloomed quietly between them. A few more deliveries, a few more smiles, and Ikenna found himself waiting near the gates whenever he heard a car honk. They shared brief moments, laughter by the kitchen window, soft conversations when others weren't looking, and once she brought him a small handwritten note. "Your eyes carry something big. Don't let this house kill it." Their bond deepened. Amarachi saw Ikenna not as a servant, but as a man, humble, hard-working, intelligent. She often told him that even though life dealt him poverty, he still held his head like someone who knew where he was going. That meant more to Ikenna than he could express. For the first time since coming to the mansion, he felt seen, not as village rat, not as houseboy, but as a man worthy of love. But happiness in that house rarely lasted. One evening, Derek caught them talking in the backyard. He smirked and walked away. The next week, Amarachi stopped coming. Ikenna asked the guards, the cook, even the drivers. No one knew. But one evening, during a board meeting run by the twins, she appeared again, dressed in silk, hanging on Desmond's arm. The sight nearly broke him. She looked different, polished, decorated, and worst of all, distant. She didn't even look his way. Rumors flew. Desmond had picked her, bought her new clothes, gave her phone money, even promised her work in one of the fashion branches of the company. And Amarachi? She had accepted. Perhaps it was for survival. Perhaps it was pressure from her mother. But to Ikenna, it felt like betrayal carved straight into his chest. That night, he cried quietly in the servant quarters, clenching the note she once gave him. Still, the next morning, he cleaned the house as usual. But something inside him had shifted, a painful reminder that in this mansion, money rewrote love, power erased dignity, and loyalty was a rare gem hidden beneath daily wounds. Heartbreak didn't break Ikenna, it refined him. The betrayal by Amarachi hurt deeply, but it also hardened his resolve. He realized something painful. Even love, if planted in the wrong soil, would rot. But knowledge? That couldn't be stolen. Neither could character. He returned to his routines, burying himself deeper into books, numbers, logistics, and planning. At night, while Derek and Desmond took women to nightclubs, Ikenna helped Clara the PA sort out missing invoices. When a warehouse manager resigned without notice, Ikenna offered to take over logistics until a replacement was hired. And when a tycoon investor visited the estate, it was Ikenna who walked him through the operational model, despite being in slippers and worn trousers. The tycoon, shocked, later whispered to Chief Damian, "That boy is not a servant. He's a builder." But within the house, his suffering continued. The twins, still unaware of the mentorship, saw Ikenna as nothing more than an overly helpful errand boy. They sent him to dry clean their clothes, polish their shoes, and even once asked him to massage their feet after a football match. At first, he refused. "I'm not your maid," he said gently. That earned him a slap and 3 nights without food. Still, Ikenna didn't report them, didn't beg. He simply adjusted. When Derek's friends came over, they mocked him openly. "So you're the famous cousin who came to learn work," they laughed. "Hope you're learning how to bend well while sweeping." The insults were routine now, like background noise. But in his mind, Ikenna no longer stood in the mansion. He stood in boardrooms. He saw numbers, mergers, property expansion. His pain became a platform. His silence, a strategy. Even the staff began to see something different in him. The drivers, once dismissive, now came to him with questions about routes and budgets. One of the cooks confessed she had started saving money after Ikenna taught her the basics of monthly planning. Slowly, the house began to shift, not in power, but in loyalty. People respected what the twins never saw. And Chief Damian watched it all unfold. He had cameras installed in the mansion, hidden speakers in meeting rooms. Every insult, every slap, every act of quiet wisdom, he saw it. And each day, the plan became clearer. "He's already doing what kings do," the chief whispered one night. "He just doesn't wear the crown yet." It was time to turn thoughts into action. Time to strip his name from the noise and see who would rise when the spotlight was gone. The day of the test had come. The air was heavier than usual that evening. Thunderclouds gathered over Lagos like a bad omen, and inside his private hospital room, Chief Damian signed a document with shaking hands. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a trust fund. It was the beginning of a plan that would change everything. Mr. Martins, his trusted lawyer, stood beside him, nervous but loyal. "You're sure about this, sir?" he asked for the 10th time. Chief Damian nodded slowly. "Let the world believe I'm dead. Let them bury me with honor, and show me who among them is truly alive inside." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. A staged heart attack, a faked ambulance call, a forged death certificate. The doctor, paid and discreet, cooperated. By morning, the news was everywhere. Billionaire Damian Okoro dies at 59. The mansion turned into a mourning ground. Cameras, reporters, and fake sympathizers swarmed the gates. The twins posted emotional tributes online. "My father was everything," Desmond tweeted. "A lion, a king. We'll carry on his legacy." But behind closed doors, neither shed a real tear. Instead, they began to calculate. "We'll liquidate the land in a wherry. That's quick cash," Derek said. "And the Abuja property? Let's throw a party after the burial. Let the world know the Okoros are still kings." Ikenna stood at the back during the funeral, dressed in faded black. He carried no umbrella when the rain fell. No one noticed his soaked shirt, his trembling lips. But Clara did. She walked over, gave him a scarf, and whispered, "He loved you, Ikenna. More than you knew." But Ikenna didn't reply. He only nodded and returned to his silence. After the casket was lowered into the ground, empty, of course, the mansion became a palace of indulgence. The twins invited models, musicians, and influencers. A party was scheduled just 3 days after the burial. Drinks flowed. Music blasted. Staff were overworked. Even the portrait of their father was removed to make room for a projector screen. Ikenna, now wearing the same servant clothes, was asked to serve champagne while watching them dance on the marble floor. He looked around at the house that was no longer a home, now a circus of inherited wealth. And yet, even in this madness, he remained calm. Because somewhere in a quiet safe house, Chief Damian Okoro watched everything unfold on hidden CCTV. He saw the twins. He saw Ikenna, and he turned to Mr. Martins and said the words that would echo into legacy. Now I know who deserves the crown. The air inside the Okoro mansion no longer smelled like grief. It reeked of champagne, cologne, and sweat. Only 3 days after the funeral, the twins turned their father's home into a luxury playground. Derek wore a diamond chain with Okoro legacy boldly engraved, while Desmond showed up shirtless, draped in silk robes like a warlord at rest. The front gates were wide open for celebrities, influencers, and gold diggers. Hired chefs turned the kitchen into a buffet zone, and bartenders lined the main hallway. Lights flashed from every corner as hired DJs pumped music loud enough to shake the chandelier. They told the staff it was a celebration of life, but in truth, it was nothing more than a vulgar display of their newfound authority. Staff whispered among themselves in disbelief. Did they even cry at the burial? Someone murmured. These ones not party dem day, use mourn papa. Ikenna, dressed in a clean but faded blue shirt and black trousers, walked through the chaos with a silver tray in hand, offering drinks to people who barely looked at him. He kept his head low, enduring jeers and catcalls. One girl tapped his chest mockingly and said, "You fine why you day waste for here? Them day pay you at all." But he only smiled faintly and moved on. Inside, his heart felt like it was bleeding. He had knelt beside Chief Damian's hospital bed. He had watched that man cough blood, wrestle breath, whisper truths. And now these two, his sons by blood, but not by honor, were dancing on the man's memory as if he had never existed. In one corner, Derek made a toast to a life of freedom. Pops lived for business. We live for enjoyment. In the hidden room of a private estate, Chief Damian sat behind screen, watching the live feed from hidden cameras. His face was cold, unreadable. Mr. Martins, the lawyer, stood beside him and sighed deeply. "It's worse than you thought." Damian didn't reply. His eyes were locked on Ikenna, who was now helping a drunken guest find a room to lie down. Not once had Ikenna touched a drink. Not once had he raised his voice. "That boy," Damian finally said, his voice thick with emotion, "has the kind of strength money cannot buy. He's the one who felt my death the most. He's the only one who carried it with dignity." As the music blared and girls danced on tabletops, Damian closed the screen and whispered, "Let them bury me with noise. The crown doesn't follow the noise, it follows the weight." The Okoro Group, once the epitome of strength and structure in Nigeria's business sphere, began to show dangerous cracks. With Chief Damian presumed dead, Derek and Desmond assumed joint control. Their first move was to fire the company's long-trusted head of operations, Mr. Ease, claiming he was too old school. They replaced him with their childhood friend Tolu, who had no business background but plenty of charm. Their second move was even worse. They sold off one of the company's prime real estate assets in Surulere, well below market value, to finance more brand expansion parties. Within a month, profit margins plummeted. Staff morale dropped. Departments operated like headless chickens. Customers complained. But the twins didn't care. They were too busy planning a new club in Lekki named Legacy, ironically in memory of their father. Ikenna watched it all happen from the shadows. Though still seen as just the servant, he had built silent friendships with mid-level staff and branch managers. They trusted him. They had seen him take initiative when nobody else cared. When the warehouse in Kano began leaking, it was Ikenna who coordinated the repairs through a contractor he knew from the village. When the accounting department flagged a 20 million Nigerian nairas discrepancy caused by Desmond's shopping spree, Ikenna personally met with the internal auditor and fixed the reports overnight. All without recognition. All without reward. Some staff began to whisper, if only this boy had a title, this company would breathe again. But titles didn't matter to Ikenna. He was focused on preservation, saving what he could from the slow ruin led by greed and ignorance. In the hidden estate, Chief Damian received reports from Clara and Mr. Martins. Each file showed deeper losses, but there, buried among the data, was one recurring name, Ikenna. He fixed this, Clara would write. He resolved that. It was like watching a lighthouse survive in a storm. Mr. Martins looked at the chief and said, "We can't wait much longer, sir." another month, and they'll sell off the shipping line. Damian nodded slowly. Just a bit more, he replied. Let them show the world who they are. Let the boy continue to show the world who he is. He knew this wasn't just about property or revenue anymore. It was about legacy. The question wasn't who would inherit the company. The real question was, who could carry its name and not break under the weight of it? While Derek and Desmond spiraled into further recklessness, Ikenna found himself standing at the center of problems he didn't cause, but felt responsible to solve. The Enugu branch of the company faced closure after Derek failed to renew essential legal permits. When the manager reached out for help, Desmond refused to act, calling it beneath him. But Ikenna, informed through Clara, traveled secretly to Enugu, held emergency meetings, and negotiated new terms with the state regulatory board. He used his own small savings to fund temporary logistics, buying time for the company. When the board heard of this, they assumed he was an official sent by the directors. They didn't know he was just the servant. He saved 43 jobs that week, all while the twins partied in Abuja. That act didn't go unnoticed. Clara, who had always respected Ikenna from the shadows, began to share internal memos with him. The staff trust you now, she said softly one night. If you asked them to follow you, they would. Ikenna shook his head. I'm not trying to be king. I'm just trying to keep this house from collapsing on us all. But deep down, a fire had been lit. The same people who once called him village rat now deferred to him for strategy. Branch heads started inviting him to weekly calls. Interns called him sir, without realizing it. He didn't chase power. It gravitated to him, drawn by his quiet integrity. Still, he made no move to claim anything, because the battle wasn't finished. The kingdom had not yet been claimed. Chief Damian watched every bit of it through Clara's discreet reports and secret recordings. One night, he rose from his chair slowly and walked to the window. It's no longer a test of character, he whispered. It's a test of endurance. The company was standing, not because of bloodline, but because of backbone. Because of a boy who mopped floors and memorized contracts. Because of a servant who had become the shield. The next morning, the chief called Mr. Martins. Draft the final will, he said. It's time to prepare the crown. Let them carry my name, but only one deserves its weight. And just like that, the final pieces began to fall into place. The storm was reaching its final surge. But the real thunder was yet to come. Chief Damian Okoro sat quietly in his private safe house, sunlight spilling through the blinds as Mr. Martins unrolled a scroll of documents. The new will had been finalized. It wasn't ordinary. It was a mirror of justice. Everything, Chief Damian said softly, must go to Ikenna. Mr. Martins paused, adjusting his glasses. Including the house? Damian nodded. The house, the businesses, even my private accounts. All of it. He looked out the window, eyes weary but resolute. If the world ever wonders why, let them watch the security footage. Let them see how my sons celebrated my death, and how a servant carried my crown without even knowing it was his. He instructed that a video recording be made, not a press statement, not a public lecture, but a raw, emotional explanation of his decision, which would be played during the official reading. A record of pain, disappointment, and truth. The next step was crucial, ensuring Ikenna remained protected. Clara had been working discreetly to shield him from backlash. She stored evidence of his efforts, from the Enugu rescue to his night shifts balancing accounts. She also collected videos showing how the twins berated him, mocked his clothes, and used his love for the company against him. She told Ikenna none of this. He wouldn't have wanted to know. He was too focused on solving the next problem, saving the shipping line from being shut down due to unpaid tax. And while the twins continued to attend award ceremonies and pose with influencers, Ikenna was up at 4 a.m., compiling data for a company-wide recovery plan. Clara sent the proposal to Chief Damian. He wept as he read it. A servant wrote this, he whispered. No, a king in disguise. But as plans were being laid for Ikenna's ultimate coronation, fate was already preparing a wound to test him. Unknown to both Ikenna and the chief, Derek had discovered Clara's visits to the archives and noticed her frequent calls to unknown numbers. Suspicious and jealous, he began to dig. Desmond, too intoxicated by his own ego, ignored it, but Derek's curiosity burned. He didn't know exactly what Clara was hiding, but he knew one thing for certain. Ikenna was becoming a problem. A quiet, dangerous threat to their control. "He's acting like the company is his," Derek muttered one night. And with a bitter smirk, he made a call to a corrupt police officer he had on payroll. "I want you to teach someone a lesson," he said coldly. And just like that, the betrayal began to bloom. When Amarachi stepped back into the compound, her belly visibly rounded beneath a flowing maternity gown, the entire mansion paused. She looked nothing like the naive, cheerful girl Ikenna once knew. Her face was tired, her eyes deeper, not with joy, but sorrow. The twins were away on a business cruise in Port Harcourt, leaving Clara in charge of logistics. It was she who opened the gate for Amarachi, gasping when she saw her. "I need to see Ikenna," Amarachi said simply. Her voice no longer held that shy, giggly melody. It was now lined with heartbreak. Ikenna had just returned from the warehouse when he saw her. He froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amarachi burst into tears. "I didn't know Desmond would use me like that," she said. "He promised marriage. He told me you were nothing, and I believed him." The pain reopened inside Ikenna like a wound never fully closed. He wanted to scream, to curse, to walk away, but instead, he simply led her into the guest quarters and offered her water. Amarachi sobbed uncontrollably. "He abandoned me when I told him I was pregnant," she said. "I've been living with a friend for months. I didn't come for pity. I just wanted to tell you the truth." Ikenna sat across from her, silent. The betrayal cut deeper, because it wasn't just Desmond. It was the same system, the same twisted logic that wealth gave you the right to destroy others. Yet, despite the storm inside, he didn't throw her out. He didn't curse her. He asked Clara to help arrange medical care. And every morning, he dropped fruits beside her bed before going to work. Not because he still loved her, but because he refused to become what they were. Amarachi began to see it, what she had thrown away. Not just a kind man, but a man of vision, strength, and grace. She watched how staff deferred to Ikenna without being told, how drivers asked for his advice, how the cook called him Oga, even without the title. Her heart broke anew. "I chose glitter," she whispered to Clara, "but gold doesn't shout." As Ikenna prepared for another round of crisis meetings, he barely spoke to Amarachi, yet he paid her clinic bills, brought her new maternity clothes, and even hired a nurse. Love had become ashes, but his compassion remained untouched. What neither of them knew was that in the coming days, the pain she brought and the betrayal about to unfold would test the last pieces of Ikenna's strength. Derek stood in his father's office, now his office, staring at the glass plaque on the wall. Chief Damian Okoro, vision beyond time. For the first time in months, something inside him stirred. Guilt? Regret? He wasn't sure. But as he remembered the party, the wasted deals, the headlines about poor management, he realized something. They were not ready. Desmond was in denial, partying harder than ever. But Derek? He was beginning to see the cracks. The board was growing impatient. Investors were withdrawing. Media outlets were calling them the collapse of legacy. But instead of correcting course, Derek chose a darker path. He would eliminate the threat. And that threat, in his mind, was Ikenna. "He's becoming too loud, too useful. They're starting to look at him like a leader," he told Desmond. "If we don't cut him down now, he'll climb over us." So, with cold calculation, he conspired with a corrupt officer to plant evidence. A forged receipt suggesting Ikenna stole 5 million Nigerian nairas from company accounts. It was laughably fake, but convincing enough to stir suspicion. That afternoon, as Ikenna prepared to leave for a branch inspection, police officers stormed the compound. "You're under arrest for corporate theft," they barked. Amarachi cried out from the balcony. Clara ran out waving her ID. But it was too late. Ikenna was dragged away in handcuffs, dirt smearing his once clean shirt. He didn't resist. He didn't shout. He looked at Clara, eyes full of quiet sorrow, and said, "Please check on Amarachi. That was all. The entire company shook that evening. Some believed the news, others whispered in doubt. But the twins? They celebrated. Finally, Desmond said, clinking glasses with Derek. The servant knows his place again. In the cold cell that night, Ikenna sat alone, his arms bruised, his dignity battered, but his spirit strangely calm. The officer assigned to him stared and asked, "Are you really the one who's been running that company?" Ikenna nodded slowly, just keeping it alive. Back in the safe house, Chief Damian received the report. The footage of Ikenna being arrested played before him, and for the first time in weeks, the old man slammed his fist on the table. "Enough," he shouted. "They think they've won, but they've just confirmed what I needed to know." The fire in his chest raged, but it wasn't his illness this time, it was anger. Righteous, measured, and final. He turned to Mr. Martins. "Prepare the reveal. We end this masquerade." The crown was no longer hidden, and the reckoning was about to begin. The prison cell was damp, cold, and carried the stench of neglect, yet it didn't break Ikenna. He sat in the corner, his back pressed to the wall, watching dust swirl under the flickering light. Every hour, a different thought pierced his mind. Was this really the price of loyalty? But he didn't regret his actions. He thought of the branches he saved, the staff who looked to him for direction, the dying company he had tried to keep breathing. His only sorrow was not the arrest. It was that Chief Damian was no longer alive to see how far the decay had reached. In that silence, Ikenna remembered the old man's voice, the nights spent learning beneath his watchful gaze, the encouragement in his eyes that no one else gave. Those memories were his armor. Clara came to visit the next morning, her eyes red with fury. "We're fighting this," she said, clutching the forged evidence in her hands. "The signature doesn't match yours. The account number is fake. They'll pay for this, Ikenna." But he raised a hand gently, shaking his head. "Don't shout. Don't beg. Just let truth speak for itself." He looked thinner, exhausted, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. Amarachi, who stood outside the holding room, refused to leave. "I lied when I said I stopped loving you," she wept. "I made a mistake. And now you're paying for a crime you didn't commit because I was too blind to see who really had a heart." Ikenna touched her hand through the bars. "Go home. Take care of a child. Don't let bitterness make you a shadow of yourself." She broke down in tears again. Meanwhile, back at Okaro Group, the news had exploded. "Servant arrested for theft at Billionaire firm." One headline read. Social media debates flooded the internet. Some ridiculed Ikenna, calling him a fraud who used brain to climb. Others, mostly employees, posted anonymously defending him. But the twins felt victorious. Derek swaggered through the office, mocking the staff. "You see? We warned him. Now he'll go back to his village where he belongs." But deep within the heart of Lagos, in a private suite wired with screens, Chief Damian Okaro watched everything. The fire in his chest was no longer just anger, it was heartbreak. He had given them time to change, to grow, to rise into men. They chose mockery, deception, and destruction. "They buried me with laughter," he whispered. "Now let me rise and teach them the meaning of legacy." It was a boardroom meeting like no other. High-ranking executives, press members, investors, and longtime partners were gathered at the Okaro Group headquarters for what had been announced as a confidential family restructuring. Derek and Desmond entered with confidence, dressed in custom agbatas, flanked by personal aides. "Let's get this over with," Desmond yawned. The company had taken hits recently, but they still believed they were in charge. Mr. Martins stood at the head of the table, adjusting his tie. "Gentlemen, thank you for attending. Before we proceed with the official reading of the late chief's video statement, and will we have one important guest who must address this room first." The projector behind him blinked on, but it wasn't a video that appeared. The door opened, and in walked Chief Damian Okaro, alive. For several seconds, no one breathed. A pin could have dropped and echoed. Derek's jaw hung open. Desmond staggered and grabbed the edge of the table. This is a joke," he screamed. Chief Damian didn't flinch. He wore a simple black senator outfit, his beard grayer than before, but his eyes sharper than ever. "You threw a party after my funeral," he said calmly. You sold company property, destroyed trust, fired men who built this firm with me. And now you call this a joke? Desmond's knees buckled. Derek's face was pale. Cameras flashed. The press erupted into murmurs. He faked his death, someone whispered. Why? The chief raised a hand and silence fell. Because sometimes the dead must rise to judge the living. He walked slowly to the head of the table and Saturday, now let us read the will. What followed was a cinematic unraveling of truth. Mr. Martins played the pre-recorded video. Chief Damian speaking directly to the camera, recounting every disappointment, every betrayal, and every lesson. He narrated how Ikenna, a boy sent from the village to learn, ended up preserving the company while his sons danced on its grave. He detailed the abuse, the slaps, the false accusations. He named Ikenna not as the servant boy, but as his true heir. To Ikenna Chibiz Okoro, he said, I leave all the company, estates, accounts, and my name, because only one carried it when I couldn't. Derek rose violently. This is madness. He's a servant. Damian turned to him and said, and yet he served better than sons. You inherited my blood, but not my values. The room clapped, some in tears. The truth had spoken. The dead had returned. The kingdom had shifted.
Silence clung to the room like fog. The projector blinked off. All eyes turned to Ikenna, who had just been escorted in from police custody, now in a clean suit arranged by Clara. He stood motionless at the entrance, still disoriented by the whirlwind of emotions. Amarachi stood behind him, teary-eyed. Chief Damian beckoned him forward. Come, he said, voice trembling slightly. Come take your seat. Ikenna looked around in disbelief. The same table where he once served tea now sat empty, waiting for him. Slowly, with the weight of 1,000 memories on his shoulders, he stepped forward and took the seat. No one clapped. No one spoke. The moment demanded stillness. Clara wiped her eyes. Mr. Martins unfolded the will again. By full legal execution, and in the presence of all major stakeholders, I hereby declare Ikenna Chibiz Okoro as the principal heir and successor of Chief Damian Okoro. Derek collapsed into his seat, muttering, You gave it all to a nobody? Desmond shook with rage. He was washing our toilets. Chief Damian leaned forward. And while washing toilets, he kept your inheritance from collapsing. He led when you loafed. He protected while you partied. And now, the world will know the difference between a name given and a name earned. He looked at both sons with weary eyes. You are my children. I love you, but love does not equal leadership. You must now earn every coin you spend. The will had a clause. The twins were to receive monthly allowances only if they worked under Ikenna for a minimum of 2 years without scandal. The humiliation was sharp, but fair. Ikenna didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply bowed his head in gratitude and said, Thank you, sir. The press exploded the next day. Billionaire leaves empire to former servant, the headline screamed. But in the offices of Okoro Group, something far deeper happened. Employees wept. Interns rejoiced. Staff brought food to the break room. One janitor said, God day, because Ikenna's story reminded them that suffering was not the end. Sometimes it was preparation. Amarachi stood beside him as they walked into his new office. She whispered, I don't deserve to stand with you. He looked at her and replied, We've both suffered. Let healing start here. Outside, the Okoro flag flew higher than ever. Inside, the real legacy had just begun. The news of Ikenna's rise spread across the nation like wildfire. Online forums erupted with debates. Television anchors dissected every detail of the late chief's fake death, and tabloids labeled Ikenna the servant king. But inside the walls of Okoro Group, something much more sacred happened. A quiet, teary coronation. There was no public ceremony, no banners or fireworks. Instead, in the executive boardroom once drenched in arrogance, Ikenna stood before the employees, all of whom had once ignored him, insulted him, or pitied him. Now they bowed. He did not stand on the elevated platform that the twins once used to feel tall. He stood on level ground with them and said only 6 words: "Let's rebuild what they nearly destroyed." Amarachi gave birth that week in a private ward of the same hospital Ikenna had once mocked as a boy volunteering. It was a baby girl. Ikenna was not the father, but he held the newborn with gentleness only pain could produce. He paid every bill, insured Amarachi, had a nanny and a new apartment in a quieter part of town, and still never asked for love in return. She wept the day she saw him sign over a small property to her name, not as payment, but as closure. "Why are you so kind?" she whispered. He replied, "Because bitterness builds nothing, and I have an empire to build." His answer made the walls of her heart tremble. She knew she had lost something rare, not just a man, but a future grounded in purpose. The twins, meanwhile, struggled to adjust. They had been given 2 office cubicles near the legal department, no assistants, no drivers, no privileges. Ikenna didn't humiliate them. He assigned them real mentors, made them attend orientation like interns, and gave them actual tasks. At first, they mocked it, but by the end of the 2nd month, the whispers of their downfall became echoes in their minds. Derek was seen staying late at the office, finally opening ledgers for the first time in his life. Desmond once apologized to a warehouse cleaner, something no one thought possible. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was the beginning of repentance. And in all this, Ikenna remained humble. He still parked his car in the lot. He still ate with the junior staff. His suit was finer, but his heart never changed. And that, more than any crown, made him a king. Months passed, and the company flourished. Under Ikenna's leadership, Okoro Group regained the trust of its investors, expanded into new markets, and was once again listed among the top 3 most stable conglomerates in West Africa. But it wasn't the money or recognition that mattered to Ikenna, it was the restoration. The same compound where he had once been called Village Rat now hosted a new mentorship center for orphans and children from poor villages. He built it in honor of his late mother, whose face now hung in the reception area, smiling down at every boy who entered hoping for a future. Clara became the company's director of operations, while Mr. Martins, having fulfilled his last duty to Chief Damian, retired in peace. One morning, as the sun broke through the large windows of the top-floor office, Chief Damian sat across from Ikenna. He was weaker now. His illness had reached its final stages, but his face wore the peace of a man who had done what few fathers could do: choose justice over sentiment. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner," he said, voice cracking. Ikenna knelt beside him and said, "You did what no one else could. You gave me a name, then gave me the strength to carry it." Chief Damian chuckled softly, eyes misty. "Not many survive the weight of a crown. You didn't just survive, you carried it through fire." That evening, Chief Damian passed away quietly in his sleep, not as a disappointed father, but as a fulfilled patriarch. This time, there was no faking. The death was real, and the burial grand, but dignified. The final scene unfolded not with thunder, but with peace. Ikenna stood alone in the boardroom, dressed in a navy blue suit. The company name had just been changed. The gold emblem on the wall now read, Ikenna Okoro and CO. He touched it gently, remembering the day he first dusted that wall. He turned to see Derek and Desmond walk in, dressed neatly, holding files, not pride. They both stopped and bowed their heads. "Thank you for not throwing us away," Derek said. Ikenna smiled. "The name we carry isn't about where we came from. It's about what we build with it." And with that, he turned to the city skyline, his heart full, not with vengeance or pride, but with purpose. Once a servant, now a king. A name once mocked, now engraved in legacy, forever. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.